Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamunatira Vanacharyaho Yamunatira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamunatira Vanacharyaho Yamunatira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jai Nitya Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Pari Vrajacharya Asto Tarsata Srimad Srivaṁ Charana Vinda Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BPD Foundracharya save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Pari Vrajacharya Asto Tarsata Srimad Srivaṁ Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Sahagastapuri Ki Brahmasa Gopotri Krishna Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srisati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopala Radha Lord Varāha Ki Brajbhumi Sri Vrindavadama Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dhamma Ki Purushtam Chaitra Janatayama Ki Ganga Mai ki, Jamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulasi Maharani ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some glories. All glories to some glories. All glories to some glories. All glories, let us be the Sri Guru and Sri Guranga. All glories to Prabhupada ki Jai. Sorry to keep you all waiting. I don't have a good excuse, I'm just sorry. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we're reading the text today. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantaṁ. Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantam. Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantam. Sunābha-sandīpita-tīvra-manyuḥ. 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 Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantam. Sunābha-sandīpita-tīvra-manyuḥ. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantam. Sunābha-sandīpita-tīvra-manyuḥ. Sva-daṁṣṭrayoddhṛtya mahīm nimagnāṁ. Uddhitaḥ saṁruruce rasāyāḥ. Tatrāpi daityaṁ gadayāpatantam. Sunābha-sandīpita-tīvra-manyuḥ. Vaishnavis? Sva-daṁṣṭrayā, by his own tusks. Uddhṛtya, raising. Mahīm, the earth. Nimagnāṁ, submerged. He, utthitaḥ, getting up. Saṁruruce, appeared very splendid. Rasāyāḥ, from the water. Tatra, there. Also. Daityam, unto the demon. Gadayā, with the club. Āpatantam, rushing towards him. Sunābha, the will of Kṛṣṇa. Sandīpita, glowing. Tīvra, fierce. Manyuḥ, anger. Translation. Lord Boar very easily took the earth upon his tusks and got it out of the water. Thus he appeared very splendid. Then his anger, glowing like the Sudarshan wheel, he immediately killed the demon Hiranyaksha, although he tried to fight with the Lord. Responsively, the Lord very easily took the earth on his tusks and got it out of the water. Thus he appeared very splendid. Then his anger, glowing like the Sudarshan wheel, he immediately killed the demon Hiranyaksha, although he tried to fight with the Lord. Purport. According to Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī, the Vedic literatures describe the incarnation of Lord Varāha, Boar, in two different devastations, namely the Chakshusa devastation and the Swayambhuva devastation. This particular appearance of the Lord actually took place in the Swayambhuva devastation, when all planets, other than the higher ones, Jana, Mahar, Satya, merged in the water of devastation. This particular incarnation of the Boar was seen by the inhabitants of the planets mentioned above. Śrīla Viśvanātha Cakravartī suggests that the sage Maitreya amalgamated both the Boar incarnations in different devastations and summarized them in his descriptions to Vidura. So quite an extraordinary pastime. And actually we see that all the pastimes performed by the Lord are quite extraordinary. When I was doing a little bit of reading in relation to this, there's an interesting description also in the 8th canto, chapter 24, where it's describing the appearance of the fish incarnation of Matsya. And a similar kind of thing, Matsya also appeared twice. He appeared once in the Swayambhuva Manvantara and again in the Chakshusa Manvantara. In the Swayambhuva Manvantara he appeared to, because as Brahma was resting, this demon called Hayagriva stole the Vedas from Brahma, so then the Lord incarnated as a fish to kill the demon and take back the Vedas. Then later, in the 6th Manvantara, the Chakshusa Manvantara, he again, in order to favor, what's his name? Satyavrata, I think, Satyavrata Muni. He appeared again. And it's very interesting because it's a similar kind of appearance, because Satyavrata Muni, he was offering oblations in the water, and he cupped his hand to get some water, and there's a fish there, a tiny little fish, and then he pours it back, pours the water back into the body of water he was in, and the fish just starts talking to him. Says, "Why are you putting me here in the water? I'll get killed." And he said, "You should, you're a merciful king. You should make arrangements for me so I can be safe." So the king puts him in a jug. Then overnight, the fish grew to such an extent that he couldn't move inside the jug. So then he put him in a well, and he grew too big for that. And he put him in a lake, he grew too big for that. And then he put him in a bigger lake, and he grew too big for that. And then finally he put him in the ocean. And the fish again started to talk to Satyavrata, and he said, "But why are you putting me here? These dangerous fish, they can eat me." And then Satyavrata started to realize that this is not an ordinary fish. What's going on here? And so then he revealed to Satyavrata Muni that he was the Lord, and that in 7 days' time there would be great inundation. And that is kind of similar to a well-known biblical story with Noah and the ark. And it's kind of interesting because you do see a lot of similarities between different scriptures, so you kind of wonder sometimes what's the original story. I mean, of course, we tend to favor the stories of the Bhagavatam, but there's some degree of overlap, and potentially they are referring to the same stories. I was talking the other day about, we see here in India, there's different personalities that sometimes have stories, related to them. There's Tenali Ram, there's Gopal Band, and Birbal. And you'll see the stories between those three personalities are often quite similar, and you never know which one's actually the person the story's about. But they're interesting stories because they help us to understand, various moral stories and various, just kind of, intelligent sort of stories. But anyway, we see here how Satyavrata, he then, he heard from the Lord about how the devastation was going to come, and that he should gather all the herbs and different plants and things like that, and different species of life, and the 7 sages, they'll get on this boat, and I'm going to have to put my leg down there soon. But, yeah, thanks. Okay. You can hear me okay? Yeah. And so, he followed the order of the Lord, and then at one point, when the devastation was getting very, the waves were getting very big and things like that, the sages requested Satyavrata to worship the Lord, because the Lord had to save them from this situation. So then he appeared as this massive fish, the same fish he's looking before, 8 million miles long. Can you imagine that? 8 million miles. I can't even conceive of 8 million miles. Even 1 million miles is inconceivable to me. And then he had a horn, and then they used Vasuki to attach the Lord's horn and the boat, so that the boat could be towed to safety. And the thing that's interesting, and it's very similar to this story, because we see how Lord Boar, he appeared out of the nostril of Brahma, and one of the I think it's Śrīla Viśvanātha said he was like the size of the tip of the thumb, and then he just flew up in the sky, and he immediately expanded very big. And it's kind of interesting because we see how the great personalities, because Manu was there, the Kumaras were there, and a few other different sages were there, and they were discussing, who is this? And it's really interesting because, reading the Bhagavatam, we think, oh, that must be Kṛṣṇa. But we can see how Kṛṣṇa's, deluding potency is working here to engage in some kind of rasa with these devotees, so that they can be marveled by what's happening and discuss, what's going on, and then finally come to the conclusion that actually this is the Lord performing his pastimes. And we see there's many extraordinary pastimes that are performed by the Lord. Also, there's one interesting pastime that comes to mind, similar sort of vein as this, where Markandeya was wanting to see the potency of the Lord. He wanted to see how the Lord's Maya works. And almost immediately a devastation happened, and he's being cast around, just thrown around the devastating waters, the waves and things like that. And then finally at the end of it, he's floating for so many years, he's just floating in this water, the devastation. And finally the waters subside, and he sees this child there on a banyan leaf, like a baby on a banyan leaf, sucking on his toe. And he's just thinking, how is this possible? How has this child survived this devastation? So obviously it's Kṛṣṇa. And Markandeya is relating this story to Yudhisthira and all the personalities in the court. Narad Muni was also there. And actually they were in the forest. They weren't in Hastinapur, they were in the forest. And Markandeya has marveled, how has this child survived this water, the water of devastation? And after some time, he started to understand that this must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he started to question the Lord about how his nature, how he because Yudhisthira Maharaj was asking him about karma and how karma plays out and how it's stored within the living entity and things like that. And so he tells this story as a way of, I can't remember the exact connection, but he tells this story to explain how the Lord's potencies work. And then at some point, the Lord was, in the form of this baby, was describing to Markandeya how the devastation works. And then he opened his mouth, and Markandeya was sucked into his body. And then when he's inside his body, he saw all the creation. He saw the Ganges. He went and visited the places of pilgrimage, the Himalayas, where he's performing pastimes. His tapasya to gain realization. And then he just realized that this whole creation was inside the abdomen of this baby, and he could not find the limit of it. Even though he was trying to find the limit of this creation, he couldn't find the limit of it. And so we see how, and eventually he comes out, and then he has further dialogue with the Lord. But the point I'm trying to get to here is we can see how the Lord performs these extraordinary pastimes in different forms. Like we see here, he's performing a pastime in the form of a boar. But it doesn't mean that Kṛṣṇa has become a boar. It means he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's conducting his wonderful pastimes in the form of a fish, in the form of a horse, in the form of a baby. In any of these different forms, he is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, fully powerful, fully able to manifest his potencies. We see when he was a young boy in Vrindavan, he lifts a gigantic mountain, holds above his head with his left hand, small finger, for 7 days continuously. And not only does he do that, but there's an interesting description. I can't remember which one the Acharya's, the Goswami's books is from, but it describes this whole vision underneath Govardhan Hill, or the whole scene that was there. And I remember several years ago visiting Bhujan Prabhu and Jagatarini in Perth. And Jagatarini's done this whole, kind of like, not a museum, but like all these like dioramas, but miniatures. He's made all these little forms of the Lord and his associates like this big. Because I guess you kind of make them so small to show the pastimes, because you imagine, trying to show Kṛṣṇa with all the 900,000 cows and the cowherd boys and all this, if you do them life size, you would need a lot of space. And so it shows this whole picture, or the whole scene of under Govardhan, and how when Kṛṣṇa lifted Govardhan Hill, he manifested this beautiful palace with all terraces and balustrades and waterfalls, and just such a beautiful scene. It's all made from precious jewels and marble and things like that. And so when Kṛṣṇa performs these pastimes, they're quite extraordinary and actually inconceivable for an ordinary living entity to understand. And so he does this in all his different pastimes, and he doesn't need to manifest as a boar, he doesn't need to manifest as a fish. He could do this in his original form, but he does these things to enjoy the sport. Just like, here we see how, as it's saying, Prabhupada says here in the purple, he's quoting from Jīva Gosvāmī, how it's actually, Maitreya for some reason has put the two pastimes into one. Because up until verse 30, it was describing the form of Varāha that manifested in Brahma's first day to lift the earth out of the Garbhodak ocean. So, because Brahma had given this instruction to Swayambhuva Manu and Sattarupa to create progeny and propagate the earth, and Swayambhuva says, "But the earth's down there in the Garbhodak ocean. How am I supposed to do that? Please lift the earth out." And so Brahma, he was meditating on how to do that, because obviously the earth is very big. How's he going to lift it? And as he was meditating like this, then this boar, this tiny form of boar, comes out of his nose. I mean, that in itself is quite extraordinary. I know the types of things that come out of my nose, and it's not a boar, you know. And so that in itself is quite extraordinary. And then this form of the boar goes up into the sky, and he starts to expand. And the Lord takes this form because this is the form that's perfect, because usually a hog, when it's finding food, it finds it by smell. So the Lord, in this boar, he enters into the earth and he locates the earth by smell, because it's down. You see in the bottom of any body of water, there's going to be, like on the floor, the floor of the ocean or the floor of the river, or the bed of the river, there's going to be kind of filth, muck. So the earth has fallen into that, which is apparently, this happens at the end of every devastation, whether partial, every partial devastation, is the earth goes into the bottom of the Garbhodak ocean. And so he takes a form that is suitable for that particular pastime, just like we see when he took the form of Nrsimha. It's also the form that was most suitable to that pastime, because as we understand, when he took the form of Nrsimha, Hiranyakashipu had got a benediction from Brahma that had all these kind of restrictions. So I can't be killed then, I can't be killed during the day, during the night, inside, outside, on land, in air, by a human being, by a demigod. He thought he had all the bases covered. But you can't trick Kṛṣṇa. You can't pull the wool over Krishna's eyes. You can't create it. It's like one time Prabhupada was asked a question: is God so great that he can create a mountain that he can't lift? And of course Prabhupada said, yes, of course, but then he'll lift it. And this is the nature of Kṛṣṇa. It's inconceivable. We cannot actually conceive of Krishna's greatness. And these different pastimes, like the pastime of Markandeya Rishi, where he manifests as a baby sucking his toe. Why is he sucking his toe? Because he wanted to understand the taste of his lotus feet, because all the devotees are aspiring for Krishna's lotus feet. So he decides, okay, I want to understand this taste. So he comes as a baby, because we see babies have that dexterity where they can put their feet in their mouth and things, and they do sometimes. So he was sucking on his toes so he could understand that taste. And we see, Kṛṣṇa has many, it describes in the third canto, the third chapter of the first canto, how the incarnations of the Lord are just like the waves in a river. And you'll see in the river there's just wave after wave after wave, just happens all day long. And so there's so many amazing incarnations that come. And in all these different incarnations, they perform extraordinary pastimes. If you look at when Kṛṣṇa, he appears as the tortoise. What's the tortoise? The Kurma incarnation. And okay, so you look externally, he's appearing there to help the devatas churn the ocean of milk, to get the nectar out of the ocean of milk, and to defeat the daityas. Yeah? But what's his internal motivation? He's got an itch on his back and he can't reach it, so he wants to get scratched on his back. So he manifests a tortoise, and huge tortoise, and then they put this mountain on his back, and they use bazookas, a churning rod, to scratch his back. So it's inconceivable. I mean, couldn't he just get one of his queens to scratch his back? No, but he does this to have these exchanges with his devotees. And sometimes these pastimes just manifest very, very extraordinarily, and this is the case here. Kṛṣṇa could have taken any form to rescue, and he didn't even have to take a form. Just by his will, just by thinking about it, the earth would have risen out of the water and resumed its orbit. But because he wants to interact exchanges, have these pastimes with his devotees, to have these loving exchanges with his devotees. And we see the result of these exchanges is the devotees become more and more attached to Kṛṣṇa. They become more marveled by Krishna's greatness, by his wonder. And so he performs so many, just like we see all these pastimes in Vrindavan, the end result of all these pastimes. Yes, Krishna's killing demons, yes, Krishna's doing so many different things, but the end result of all these pastimes is the devotee's attachment for Kṛṣṇa deepens. And even though we see, mostly in Vrindavan, the devotees have no idea that he's God. In these types of pastimes here, we see with Matsya, with Varāha, and all these different types of pastimes, they understand he's God. There's a difference there. There's a difference there in the pastime, but in the pastimes of Vrindavan, they're completely devoid of this perception of God. And sometimes we see that notion of God comes into the devotee's mind, and immediately they become bewildered by Krishna's yoga maya. So Kṛṣṇa performs these pastimes simply for this point of I mean, really the main reason is this loving exchange with the devotees. And we see that. And Prabhupada makes an interesting point. I mean, I was talking about it before. Prabhupada makes this point here, how it's actually two incarnations rolled into one. No idea why Maitreya is explaining it like that. It doesn't mention. But just to give some supporting evidence, this is from the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, chapter 3. The Boar avatar advented twice. First, this is 1.3.10 from the Laghu Bhagavatamrita. The Boar avatar advented twice. First during Swayambhuva from the nostril of Brahma, in order to lift up the earth. So this is the one that's just been described in the previous verses. And second time during Chakshusha Manvantara, appearing from the water. This is what's being described in the second half of this verse here. This is, I won't read the commentaries. The boar with tusks assumed the four-legged animal form to kill Hiranyaksha and lift the earth. According to some authorities, however, this form is half man and half boar, and this is actually mentioned in the Padma Purana. Sometimes the boar avatar is black like a cloud, and sometimes he is white like a moon. With either color, he is the form of sacrifice and very strong. So the form that appeared in the Swayambhuva Manvantara, which was described in the previous verses, this is called Śrīla Varāha. And the one that's being described in this verse is called Nīla Varāha, because initially he comes out, he's reddish, but then he assumes a blackish form after he kills Hiranyaksha. Then it goes on to say, it is stated in the scriptures that Hiranyaksha was born from Daksha, who was the son of the Kshetras during the reign of Chakshusha Manu. Thus the appearance of the Boar avatar during the reign of Chakshusha Manu is confirmed by the information about the birth of Daksha at that time. Because here we see how he's killing Hiranyaksha, who is the son of Diti, and Diti was the daughter of Daksha, and Daksha was present during the reign of Chakshusha Manu, not during Swayambhuva Manu's time. So you can see how it's, the evidence is there that it's actually two personalities. Daksha is described, or same personality, two different forms. Daksha is described in the 4th canto. His previous body had been destroyed, but the same Daksha, inspired by the Supreme Will, created all desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. So this is in Daksha's second form that he had, that this was happening. Then Daksha was the son of the Prachetas in the lineage of Uttanapad. Daksha's daughter was Diti. Hiranyaksha was the son of Diti. At the beginning of the first Kalpa of Brahma, Swayambhuva's sons had produced no offspring. Thus the Prachetas, Daksha, Diti, and Hiranyaksha could not have existed. So we see, like at this point, up until this verse here, we see how it's the pastime is unfolding of how Swayambhuva Manu was asked to create progeny, and his wife Satarupa, but they hadn't created any progeny at that point, and there was no place for them to create progeny. So they asked Brahma, please lift the earth, and then so this precipitated the appearance of the first form of this Sveta Varāha. Then it goes on. Yeah. And he mentions here how Maitreya, being asked by Vidura, narrated the activities of both appearances in one story. So obviously he felt it wasn't necessary to have two separate stories there. So yeah, quite extraordinary pastime here. Both these pastimes are quite extraordinary. But from my understanding of it, the whole purpose here is to increase the devotee's attachment for Krishna. Just like we see, Hiranyaksha, he's creating havoc. He pushes the earth down into, by his nefarious activities. It's described how he was mining the earth and taking all the minerals out of the earth, and this caused a disruption to the stability of the earth in its orbit, so it fell down into the ocean. And Prabhupada also mentions, it's interesting, he mentions how oil is what causes the earth to float. And he says because the demoniac scientists are pulling all the oil, these people are pulling all the oil out of the earth, at some point it's going to start sinking. So interesting times ahead. But so the point is, we see how the devotees, when they see the wonderful pastime of Krishna, their faith deepens. They become more attached to Krishna. And this is the same for us. This is why it's so important for us to regularly read the Bhagavatam, to regularly hear about Krishna, because when we read these wonderful stories, we can see how Krishna, he's the protector of the devotees. And also we see, it's an interesting point in this pastime, how when the Lord roared, he roared twice. When he roared, the devotees felt satisfaction, they felt pleasure, but the demons felt disturbance. They felt that this is not a good sign. And even we see how, as described a few verses previous, how when the Lord roared, the residents in the higher planets, the Satyaloka, Janaloka, and Tapaloka, they started to feel well-being. They felt very good about this roaring, even though it's described how this is the roaring of a pig or the grunting of a pig, but it was really, really loud. And in one of the commentaries there, it mentions how the size or the volume of the roar was proportionate to the body. It's described how his body was like a mountain. And we see how it was very, very loud. And the devotees were not scared by that. They weren't fearful. They felt great satisfaction hearing that roar. And then he roared, as the sages were offering prayers to him, then he roared again, giving pleasure to the devotees. So we see how these pastimes, and always we see at the end of these pastimes, they always offer these benedictions, that you hear these pastimes, you describe these pastimes as great benefit, which also gives the devotees comfort in knowing that, if I simply take my time or engage my time in hearing about and talking about, discussing the Lord, then this will ultimately lead to my emancipation, will ultimately bring me to the point of giving up this material conditioning, giving up this material body and returning to the spiritual world. So these pastimes are very, very wonderful for us to hear and to read about. And also, as I was saying, it helps us to really develop this faith, to develop this awareness how Kṛṣṇa is our eternal benefactor. And he's always got our well-being at heart. And he performs these pastimes simply, because it mentions in the Gita how he's this suriram sarvabhutanam. He's the supreme well-wishing friend of all living entities. And he performs these pastimes for our benefit, to ultimately bring us to the point of surrendering to him and just giving our life for his pleasure. So yeah, very amazing pastime. Any questions, comments at all? Ramachandra? I'm a little bit hard of hearing today, my ears blocked, so you might have to speak up.
I'm sorry, say again?
I'm hard of hearing today, my ears blocked. I can't hear much.
Well, is this okay?
Fine, I can hear.
You have described in this class truly inconceivable features of God, and you have made it so understandable. You explained the reason for the Lord's appearance while he's displaying a form and pastimes that are so beyond us, inconceivable. I mean, when it says the boar is like a mountain, we have to understand that's not a regular mountain on Earth. We have no idea what kind of mountain that is, that the Earth planet itself is so much smaller than his body. These are just so wondrous. So I want to thank you for sharing that nectar. That class was just waves of nectar. Thank you very much. Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Thank you for your kind words, which I don't deserve.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the nice class and nice description. Some of the nice details you brought about the Varāha Leela. So you were explaining that the white Varāha Dev, he had to have happened before Hiranyaksha's birth, because Manu had not yet had children who are the fathers of Daksha and Diti and so forth. So that would mean that the pastime with Hiranyaksha happened in the Chakshusha Manu, correct? So that's kind of interesting, because we see that there's a big chunk of time between when Hiranyaksha was kind of born and when this pastime took place. So I was just getting some clarification there. Thank you.
And it's also interesting because in each day of Brahma, I think there's 14 Manus, and Chakshusha is the 6th Manu. But it doesn't say which day of Brahma. The Swayambhuva Manu, he comes in the beginning of Brahma's life, but it's not saying which, so it could be millennia, you don't know, because the Bhagavatam doesn't really give a lot of chronology. It's more focused on themes, and so you don't know when it's come. But the point is as is explained in the first canto, this daityaṁ Kṛṣṇa. These avatars just come again and again and again and again, and the whole point is okay. He's Prithanaya Saranam Vinishchaya Dushkitam, all this. He's annihilating the miscreants and that. But the main point is to engage in these pastimes with devotees, to churn the heart of the devotees, to develop this love for Kṛṣṇa. And this is the real point of the pastime, is so that we can become more and more attached to Kṛṣṇa. And also the devotees that are there. We see how Satyavrata, when he saw this form of Matsya, and Matsya saved him in this very difficult situation, his outpourings of his love for, read the prayers of Satyavrata Muni in the 8th canto, his outpourings of love for Kṛṣṇa are quite profound. And you'll see this often is the case, and you'll see in the subsequent verses now. I think there's 2 more verses describing this incarnation. Then the sages, in verse 34, I think it is, the sages start to offer prayers glorifying Kṛṣṇa. And this is always the result. They see the pastime, then they express their love for the Lord.
Thank you, Prabhu. And just one more clarification was that you were reading from the Laghu Bhagavatam Rita?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, chapter 3, verse 10 through to about 15, 16.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you very much. Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol.